Hello, Kobo in Conversation listeners. It's Nathan. I'm the producer of the show. While we take a little break over the holidays, we're going to drop a couple of special episodes in the feed. First, we've got romance novelist Talia Hibbert, who was interviewed on our sister show, the Kobo Writing Life podcast. That's where my colleagues, Joni and Stephanie, talk to writers about how they manage their publishing careers. They spoke to Talia about where her ideas come from, and they talk about Wrapped Up in You, a novella you can get from Kobo. Just follow the link in the show notes. I'll be back at the end of the episode with a quick note, but for now, over to Joni and Stephanie.
Hey writers, you're listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast, where we bring you insights and inspiration for growing your self-publishing business. We're your hosts. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Joni. We have Talia Hibbert today with us on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, Talia.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat.
For anyone who is unfamiliar with your work, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I write sexy, diverse romance. That's what I like to call it anyway. And I've written, I want to say 17 books now. And my thing is kind of warm, cozy romance about people having a great time, being nice to each other. That's what I like to read, and it's what I like to write.
Nice. So you're a hybrid author. You have both traditional and indie published books. How did you get your start? Did you start out indie or traditional?
I started out as an indie author because I kind of assumed that traditional publishing was out of my reach. Firstly, because when I started writing, I was in my final year of university and I was kind of splitting my focus. And then also because being a marginalized person wanting to write about marginalized characters, I was aware of a lot of barriers and discrimination in publishing that made me think that I wouldn't really have a chance. So it seemed a lot more sensible to just take control and publish my own books.
How have you found, from that perspective, how have you found the indie publishing world in terms of being more accessible and fewer barriers to entry, that kind of thing?
I feel like the indie publishing world was worlds more accessible than traditional publishing has been. And I honestly feel like, just from what I've observed over the few years that I've been publishing, that the accessibility and the resulting inclusivity of indie publishing, at least in romance, has really influenced traditional publishing and kind of proved that there is a wider audience who wants what we've got. And that has spurred traditional publishing to take more risks, I think.
Yeah, that's true, actually. It's a good way of putting it. I think that might have been a big factor in influencing trad.
How did you find when you published traditionally? How was that experience compared to your self-publishing books yourself?
So I was really nervous when I started, my first traditionally published book. I had no idea what to expect because I think especially when you've already been indie publishing for a while, people are like, oh, this person knows about publishing, so I don't need to explain anything to her. And I know that I could have asked questions, but I am not an asking questions person because I'm always like, oh, is this a silly question? Are they going to be annoyed? So I had no idea what was going to happen. And I just had to kind of wait for things to happen and then be like, oh, so that's how it works. But luckily for me, I was working with really lovely people who wanted the best for my books. And so it all went quite smoothly. The main differences were that, I had a huge team, whereas before I'd been the only one responsible for all the elements of putting my book out there. And now really all I had to worry about was working on the actual words, and someone else was doing the marketing and making the decisions and getting the actual book put together. So that was very refreshing and kind of relaxing. But some differences were that I had to consider the market and the opinions of the publisher, whereas previously I'd been trying to consider things that influence sales, but honestly, I was just doing what I felt like. And that has been really interesting and a learning curve. And I've definitely learned more about, the business side of things. And I've always been interested in marketing, so it was nice to learn more about that by observing the team that I was working with. So all in all, I'd say it's been a really great lesson and a fun experience.
Did you find, because you have a lot of control as an indie author and you make all the decisions, as you said, and you said it was refreshing not to have everything be on your shoulders, but was there any part of you that was bothered by the loss of control? Were there any decisions that you maybe felt like your publishing house, you would have done it differently?
I think I was quite lucky because I when I pitched the series, my pitch kind of included how I envisioned it being marketed. And I think maybe by chance my vision aligned with what my publisher wanted to do. So the decisions that were made, I didn't have a problem with them, probably because I agreed with them. Maybe if I'd had a completely different tactic that I wanted to do and I didn't get my way, I would have been like, oh my God, this is terrible. But because, luckily for me, the only thing that I ever didn't agree on was really minor stuff, like there were different colored versions of a cover, and I liked one cover, one color, but the marketing team was like, no, it looks too young, we have to go with this color. And I was like, but I want the other color. And I had a little tantrum, but that was the only thing, really.
I think also when you're coming from indie to trad, you're in a position of power there because they know that you can do fine without them at this point. So there's probably a little bit of you're coming from a strong position when you've already established yourself as an indie.
Yeah, I think I definitely felt more confident getting a deal after having already published than I would have if I'd got it without that experience, because like you said, you do have a bit of a stronger position because it's like, well, I don't actually need this because I was doing fun without it. So if something terrible does happen, everything's going to be okay. And it was nice to have that feeling.
When you pitch a publisher, do people usually include like how you want it to be marketed? I have no idea. I'm just wondering.
I don't really know either. My agent was like, okay, let's put a pitch together. And I was thinking, how can I say I have no idea how to do that without sounding like I have no idea how to do that? And I kind of phrased it very subtly a few times, and my agent was like, what? And then I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And she was like, oh, you should have said. So she sent me some examples with permission from other writers that she agents for, and I found them really helpful. And one of the things that my favorite one did was it kind of set up the series, because I was trying to pitch a series, and it said like, these are the people in the series. This is the core of what brings them together, which in this case was like a place. And they described those elements, and I found that really interesting. So that's how I built my pitch. These are the sisters, this is the family. And then from that point, that kind of spiraled into me thinking, I guess because I did have that indie experience and I had marketed my own books, that spiraled into me saying, so it would be like this and feels like this. And I like these kind of books with this kind of cover that have the same feel. Like I remember I mentioned the Kiss quotient, and I mentioned the cover and the kind of rom-com messaging and the vibe. And yeah, I guess that's how that slid into the pitch. But I don't know if that's normal or not.
For anyone listening, can you tell our listeners the name of that series and the title of the first book?
Oh, yeah. The series is called the Brown Sisters series, and the first book is called Get a Life, Chloe Brown.
I loved it a lot. I recommend it.
Thank you.
So you have a Kobo original coming out. It's called Wrapped Up in You, releasing November 16th. Can you tell us a little bit about this book?
Yes, I'm super excited. So it's very Christmassy. It's very, not even Christmassy, but like wintry, that feeling at the end of the year that it's just really a great time for family to get together because you're more likely to have holiday and it's cold, so everyone wants to stay inside. All those kinds of feelings I really tried to pack into it. So there's like lots of pets and hot chocolate, and they're in Scotland in like a remote farmhouse, and there's a wacky grandma, because I love wacky grandmas. And really it's about a woman who were very close as kids, who grew up as family friends, and then he went on to become an actor and got quite a bit of success, and she just stayed in her regular life. But these kind of had feelings for each other, and this Christmas, because of various factors, he is determined to finally say something about it. So he's come home from LA and he is going to make her fall in love with him. But she is not that kind of person. She's a bit frosty and very cautious, and she's healing from some things that have happened in the past. So it's kind of how they negotiate that and how they prioritize their friendship, and it's quite cozy, I think.
So perfect for Christmas. How does a book start for you? Like, how do you come up with the premise? Do you start with a trope or a character, or what's the origin point?
It definitely depends on the book. I feel like I have different elements kind of floating around in my head. Like I think, oh, I would love to write this trope or this particular scene that stems from this trope. Like just off the top of my head, if you have the fated mates trope, I would love to write a scene where they're enemies and then they see each other and they're like, oh God, that's my mate. So sometimes I get little ideas like that and then I hold on to them. And on the other side of my brain, I have like character ideas, like kind of voices and personalities that won't leave me alone. And then I get to the point where I put them together like puzzle pieces. And when something fits, then I'm like, okay, I have enough to kind of start writing this down.
What's your writing process like? Does it kind of change when you're writing shorter fiction like a novella compared to a novel?
It definitely changes depending on length. It changes from book to book, but a shorter book like a novella is a lot easier to plan out because all the sections are smaller, because I tend to think of a book in sections. It's easier for me to hold a smaller number of events in my head. So I can plan the end of the book without forgetting the beginning. Whereas if I try to plan the end of a longer book, by the time I've planned that out, I've forgotten the beginning. So with longer books, I plan less far in advance. Like I might plan act 1 and I might have very vague ideas about what I want, say, the dark moment to be, but won't have that much detail. Whereas with shorter books, I can maybe be a bit more precise in advance, but it depends on how the story hits me.
Yeah, I'm always kind of interested to hear about the nitty-gritty of how authors like plan in advance and that. So you said you split it into sections, and then do you have a pretty clear idea in your head when you start out how things are going to go?
Sometimes I do. Sometimes I think I have an idea and then I start writing and I'm like, oh, my idea was wrong. But I think a lot of the time the structure that I think of depends on the trope. So for example, if I know I'm going to have a trope where my characters maybe already know each other when the book starts, that will affect the structure of the book versus if they've only just met. Because of, when I'm pacing my book, I like to make sure that my characters spend a lot of time together. Like I think some of my books, they spend all their time together, which I don't think every romance novel does that. I think I just have problems. I just like forcing them together in every possible situation. So depending on how intense things are going to be and what's kind of going on in both of their personal arcs, that affects which plot structure I choose, whether I go with like a more traditional 3 or 4 act structure, or if I follow like romantic beats rather than traditional story structure.
How did you find it writing a Christmas-based story? Are you a big fan of Christmas and the holidays?
I like Christmas mostly because there's a lot of food at Christmas. But in my family, all of our birthdays are like crammed into November, December, and January. So like all of us, except for one of my sisters, she's the odd one out. So for me, Christmas is kind of merged with like birthday season. And so I'm not like a huge Christmas person, but I am like a huge winter family by the fire person. So I enjoyed getting that in there. And also one thing I do like about Christmas is it allows you to work with a lot of tropes, like the person who hates Christmas meets the person who loves Christmas and other OTT things like that.
It's funny you mentioned all your family's birthdays are in one specific set of months, because that is also the same about my family for some reason. I'm the one that's born in January compared to August, September.
That's so weird.
I don't know why that's weird. I want a scientific research on that. Joni, is it the same for you?
No, but you know what the scientific explanation is, and you know that works.
Holidays.
So what was 9 months before this? And do I actually want to know anything about that?
Anyways, we're gonna. So, do you write every day, or how do you kind of plan your writing out? Do you have a word goal? How do you approach that?
I don't write every day. I remember at one point I was like, ooh, so-and-so said I have to write every day to be a real writer, so I'm going to do that. And then I did that, and then I hated writing for the first time in my life. And I was like, oh no, this is bad. So then I stopped writing every day. And now I kind of like to treat writing like a 9 to 5, except I don't think we should work 9 to 5. So I do it like 10 to 3, which is my preferred work day, Monday to Thursday. And when I am writing, because I'm not always working on drafting a book, but when I am, I try to write for like 4 hours a day, Monday to Thursday. And then the rest of my work day is spent doing, business stuff, the boring part.
So I would say social media is probably part of your, like, not even business plan. I don't like that word, but like part of your brand, we'll say. Did you have like a specific idea of what you wanted to use for your social media platforms? Or did you just kind of like, this worked for me, I'm just going to go with it?
It was a bit of both. Before I wrote, I had like a YouTube channel, and well, I was a makeup artist and I did hair and makeup on YouTube as well, because I was like, oh, I might be really rich and famous, which obviously didn't happen. But it was a lot of fun.
You never know. It could be coming.
Kind of off the back of that, I had a Twitter account to promote my beauty and what have you. And I discovered that I really liked Twitter and that I was quite good at it. So when I started writing, the first thing I did was open a Twitter account, because I was like, this is going to be my one true platform. But then I read some books about how to be a published author and branding, and they said that I should be on Facebook and Instagram. So I was like, oh, I'm going to be on Facebook and Instagram. And I shouldn't have done that, because I hate Facebook. And now I've committed to being on there. And I've actually built up a Facebook group, which I like. So now I've done that, I can't get off Facebook. But when I scroll through the Facebook timeline, I feel rage and sadness. So I've kind of trapped myself there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Facebook's got a lot of things that are really helpful for authors and for readers. But yeah, that timeline.
But it's nice to have a group. But I think, you only need one or two platforms that you're actually enthusiastic about, because it's best to make it something that you like, because it's, whether you're enjoying yourself on social media or not, it will suck up huge swathes of your time. So it needs to be something that you like vibe with.
When you started it, was it all just very much organic when you were building your mailing list and creating that readership? How did you start?
So my mailing list, especially, I think I tried to keep organic, because I felt like it was the most important part, more important than social media, because your email address is actually quite a precious piece of data, and it's more of a direct contact. A lot of us read our emails more seriously than we read, all the tat that you scroll through on Twitter, for example. So I wanted that to be a list of people who actually really wanted to hear from me. And that meant that my mailing list was very slow to grow. And, I think my mailing list is like half my follower account on Twitter, half my follower account on Instagram. But it has a lot more power in terms of readers. If I send them a link and say, click this link, they will click the link. Whereas if I post it on Twitter and say, click this link, some people will reply saying, actually, that link format is ineffective and you should have used this. And some people will quote tweet with a joke about links that does nothing for me. So newsletters should be organic. I think that makes them more powerful. Whereas, social media, I feel like that's a lot more about building your identity and being known, which is also, valuable or effective when you're trying to get your name out there. But it's definitely a different goal, so it should be treated differently. But I think that was organic too.
Were you already a writer, or did you have Twitter way before you started selling books?
I had Twitter since I was like 13, I think.
Okay.
And then it's quite weird. So when I was like 16, 17, I realized I had like 3,000 followers, and I didn't like it because people were talking to me too much. So I deleted my account and I started a new one. And then a couple of years later, I got too many followers again. So I deleted my account and started a new one. And I did that like 4 times. And my author account was another new account. And it's the only one that I have never deactivated.
It's really funny. And in your author account, I guess you get a lot of people talking to you and following you.
But it turns out, when they're talking about books, I'm much more receptive.
The romance community on Twitter is something that's really very fun to watch, and can be really I don't know, the romance community has done some really interesting things lately. We were watching what was going on in Georgia with, was it Milan who was leading the charge on that? How have you found...
Abrams?
Yeah, Stacey Abrams, who's a romance writer as well. How have you found the romance community in general? Do you find that it's a welcoming community sometimes?
Yeah, I love the romance community. I know that. I feel like other people think we're really scary because whenever anyone talks bad about romance, everyone shows up with like cocked pistols. But that that is misleading. Romance people are generally super nice. I feel like, you know, one thing I was nervous about, one thing I'm always nervous about because I'm very socially awkward, is like, oh, no one's going to talk to me. I'm going to be the weirdo on my own. But it's impossible to be on your own in Romancelandia, I think, because there's so many of us and we're very open-minded, and a lot of people I've found are just really, really kind in, you know, a very unusual way that you don't see everywhere. So that has been my favorite part, especially of being on social media, and probably a main reason why I've managed not to deactivate my Twitter account.
My like one romance book, and you don't think anyone else is going to like it, but you're going to find that one person on Twitter who agrees with you and loves it just as much as you.
Exactly.
I also find Twitter is kind of one of the ways I get book recommendations specifically for romance, which like more, not the mainstream, but like more indie books get recommended to me through Twitter than I think any other channel, which is really interesting.
Yeah, like Twitter is definitely where I find books that I don't think I would have found any other way. So it's definitely where I get the majority of my recs. Even like the book I'm reading right now, someone had tweeted like, I'm looking for a book where this, and this happens. And someone replied, I don't know that book, but if you like that, you might enjoy this book where this happens. And I was looking at it like, I think I would enjoy that book where that happens. So I got the book and I did enjoy it.
What's the thing to know?
Wait, let me see if I've got my phone, because the reason I never mention titles is because I could never remember them.
Sometimes I only have books by the cover.
Yes, I remember books by the cover. Oh, okay. It's called No Longer a Gentleman, and it is by Mary Jo Putney. And I have never read anything by her, but I am going to read more by her because this is a banger.
Oh, excellent. We will drop
Love a historical romance.
Are there any romance authors that influenced you a lot, or who you read growing up, whose writing you love? Any recommendations?
Oh, so many. So when I was growing up, the first romances I ever read were by Julia Quinn. Basically, my library, I live in a small town, so our library is quite small. And I think for a long time, they had like every book she'd ever written and no other romance novel. So that's how I discovered romance, and I read all of them. And I feel like she influenced me a lot because her books are so funny and lighthearted and filled with banter. And when I'm writing, I find myself like writing that same back and forth and always aiming for the connection between my main characters to have that kind of fun element. So I would say that she was foundational. And then when I got older, that is when I discovered authors like Rebecca Weatherspoon and Alicia Rye, and I read like everything they'd ever written. And I was like, oh my God, they're writing books about like people that they relate to, that I relate to. I can write books like this as well. And like, obviously people want to read it because I'm reading it and I'm having a great time. So that really changed my perspective and kind of opened a mental door for me.
Are you excited for the Netflix series coming out?
Oh my God.
When the trailer came out, I sent it to everyone. Joni probably got it too. I put it in the group chat to be like, guys, it's ready.
I was actually like, I have been insufferable over this series ever since they made the announcement. And I was so annoyed because provided we're not in lockdown, our family has a plan to isolate before Christmas so that everyone can come to my house to do Christmas, because this is our first Christmas with our own house. And I was really looking forward to it. And then I found out that the series was coming out on Christmas Day. And suddenly I was like, I never want to see my family. I don't even like those people. They can all stay at home. I'm very busy. Very busy.
Watch it with you? You can't just say this is what we're doing.
With me.
I can't. Nobody. I told my family, like, guys, I'm going to be busy. Just so you know, I need 6 hours at least.
My boyfriend said that he would watch it with me because he likes romance, but not on Christmas Day. And I was like, so what's the point? What's the point of you? What's the point of this relationship?
It's a perfect accompaniment to a Christmas time.
I think so. I'm so excited. And I love, obviously I love Shonda Rhimes as well. So I love how it looked in the trailer. You know, it had that perfect glamorous look. Someone on Twitter said it was giving Gossip Girl Regency. And I just think that's so perfect for the books. And I'm also really excited because I actually used to know, well, no is very generous. I went to school with one of the actresses involved.
Who was it?
I don't want to say because I don't want to be super weird, especially if she finds out and she's like, I have no idea who you are.
All right, we'll get it from you later. We'll try to it's for later. Okay, so I'm just going to move gears a bit to kind of like writing business. What do you think has been the best thing that you've done for your writing career?
Oh gosh, I feel like looking back, I feel like there are always kind of different stages or like different steps, and I stay at one level and then I kind of, everything I do takes me a little bit higher, and then one last thing will bump me over the ledge onto the next step. So I definitely feel like there's the perfect word that means what I'm thinking, but I've forgotten that word. But I feel, cumulative. I feel like it's cumulative. So it was sort of like when I was first starting out, the best thing I did was really closely study other authors, everything from, how they were writing to how they were titling it and kind of packaging it to how they promoted it, and deciding what I liked and then emulating that as closely as I could in terms of like the laser sharp marketing and intention. And that really changed things for me. And then once I'd gotten the hang of that, it was all about being able to invest more money to be even more on brand and look even more kind of clean and professional. And again, that really changed things for me. And then kind of because I built this audience, figuring out what I wanted to do with it, figuring out what kind of books or what I wanted my brand to mean. Like when people see my name, what kind of books are they thinking of? And then really getting to understand that and channeling it through my writing and making sure that it represented me, that leveled me up again. So I feel like it's just always trying new things to get closer and closer to being precisely an expression of your best bookish self.
That's a really great and very complete answer. This is kind of ironic. At the beginning of this year, or the end of last year, we all sat around and talked about our predictions for publishing over the next year. And obviously 2020 was not at all what we expected. But I'm interested, do you have any predictions or ideas about how you think the next few years are going to be in publishing? Where do you see us going?
Well, I haven't been very forward thinking at the moment because I'm kind of more thinking, what the hell is going on, like every day for new reasons. But I do have one thing that I believe is going to happen. I believe there is going to be a paranormal renaissance, and I think it's going to be all about paranormal rom-coms, like when it was Mary Janice Davidson and other people who I used to love, but I can't remember their names, that is going to come back.
Like a Kresley Cole?
Yes, but like...
series?
Yes, and I love Kresley Cole, but I feel like the Immortals After Dark series, we have been in this phase of marketing paranormal as like very serious, even when it's not necessarily. So like her covers at present are all kind of very serious, traditionally gothic. Whereas moving forward, I think authors like Kresley Cole will have like the cartoon covers, but paranormal and things like that.
I would guess you're right. I can see that, like, just given like the temperature of the world, I want to say people are going to be looking more towards rom-coms and like superheroes in their romance novels.
Superheroes. I believe that.
It's a good prediction. What can readers expect from you next?
Obviously, Wrapped Up in You is coming out very soon, ending the year with a bang, I hope. And then the third and final book in my Brown Sisters series, Act Your Age, Eve Brown, is coming out in March, which is exciting. And after that, I am thinking about rom-coms. I'm thinking about paranormal, so I really hope my prediction is accurate. I'm thinking, about fun stories that are maybe even more off the wall than I have previously liked to write. Like I am ready to be removed from reality than I was before because I now dislike reality more than I ever have. So lots and lots of fun. That's what I'm hoping to bring.
That sounds like something we all need, especially after this year.
And then we have our fave question. What have you been loving lately? And then I'm going to add a bit is like, what's a bananas book series that you also like?
Let's see. Lately, I've been loving like books.
Could be anything. TV, movie, podcast, whatever.
Okay. Well, I've really been enjoying Fleabag, which I'm rewatching for like the third time. So, but every time I watch it, like I feel inspired by a different element of it because it's just so funny in so many
good.
ways.
You know what I haven't watched yet is I May Destroy You, which I've heard is the next fantastic show.
I'm worried about, I don't know if you guys ever watched Chewing Gum with Michaela Cole.
Mm-hmm.
I have. I've heard of it because it had Susan Wokoma in it, right? I heard her talk about it. Okay.
I love her. She's like,
so do I.
And I loved her show Crazy Head as well. That was a comedy and I loved that one. And I loved Chewing Gum, but I don't think I May Destroy You as a comedy. And I was talking to my friends about it. My friends all loved it. And when they were describing it to me, it sounded like the kind of thing that would really upset me.
It sounds heavy. Yeah.
It's very dark. Sometimes I needed like a break between the episodes. There are some funny parts, but yeah. Nothing, I don't think.
Fleabag's dark too. It's not heavy in content, but it's dark comedy.
Fleabag is definitely dark, but I feel like I didn't know it was going to be dark, and then it would be dark, and I'd be like, wait, what?
Yes.
Which made it easier to handle.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm working up to I May Destroy You. And then book-wise, I have been enjoying so much. I feel like I read very chaotically, but I recently discovered, I think her name is T. Kingfisher, and
that sounds familiar.
Yeah, and I started with this book called Sword Heart, which was like, it was a fantasy romance, and I'm always looking for those. I didn't realize it was basically like a comedy. It was hilarious. There's like a man who's trapped in a sword, and he is cursed to serve whoever draws the sword. And then like a middle-aged widow draws the sword, and they go on many adventures. But also
this is ringing bells for me.
It's fun.
Do you read a lot of romance? Or I know some people don't like to read in the genre that they're writing because they are afraid maybe that they'll take some plot points, or do you just like love romance?
Oh my God, romance is all I read. I couldn't imagine not reading it. I would have nothing else to read, and then I would just slowly die in a heap. I find that it fills a creative well, to read amazing books in your own genre. Like, it's good to see what everyone is doing. I don't think you can accidentally copy plot points. I think authors are all really self-conscious about this. Like, I was talking to my friend, and she was telling me about her book, and I was saying, oh, that sounds like this book. And she was like, oh, does it? Should I change it? And I was like, no! All that means is that people who like this book are going to like your book as well. But, we're all the same species, so we all have the same ideas, but it's how we execute them that matters, and we all do that differently.
Do you ever, though, okay, this is my fear, when we've been doing NaNoWriMo, sometimes I feel like I want to emulate an author's style, like in terms of writing style, which I don't think is always a good idea. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you hear like perfect phrases and whatnot, and that's something that always scares me, and I wonder how authors deal with that, or if it's not really a problem and you just become more original as you write more.
Well, when I first started writing, not even publishing, but when I was just like experimenting with writing as a teenager, I had a problem where I would get like huge crushes on the way an author wrote, and I'd be like, I'm going to write like them now. And I'd start a story writing like them, and by the time I finished the chapter, it would just sound like me again. Mm-hmm. And I honestly think like it's impossible to avoid your own voice, because when you're writing, you're seeing, or if not seeing, experiencing the story in your mind, however you experience your imagination. You communicate that directly. And if you're emulating someone else, you have to put it through a filter, and that's an extra level of effort. So the filter is always going to slip. And especially I feel the more you write and the more confident you become, your voice is kind of honed in, a lot more difficult to turn off and a lot more intense.
And I suppose your unique voice is made out of all of the different authors that you've read and loved and influenced, and it all sort of meshes together to become something that's unique to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Because obviously when you really are in the piece of writing, you're like, oh, it's possible to do that? That's what I want to do. And obviously we all love different things, so we're all informed by those different things, and we all put them through our own lens. So yeah, I think that's true.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great.
I've had loads of fun talking books, so thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast. If you're interested in learning more about Talia or reading her books, we will include links to them in the show notes.
And make sure to check it out, Wrapped Up in You. It's available on Kobo right now. This episode was produced by Stephanie McGrath and Joni DePlacido. Production assistance by Rachel Wharton. This episode was edited by Kelly Robotham. Music was provided by Tearjerker, and special thanks to Talia for being a guest on our episode. If you're ready to start your self-publishing journey today, sign up for free at kobo.com/writinglife. Until next time, happy writing.
Like Stephanie says, if you've got a book in you ready to get out into the world, head on over to Kobo Writing Life. We'll be back with a special staff picks episode of Kobo in Conversation next week. It was a lot of fun to do, and we've got so many great books to recommend. In the meantime, though, you can catch up with past episodes and browse books recommended by amazing authors at kobo.com/conversation.